welcome into today's episode of the Zach Moore Podcast 36. I'm going to start doing a little bit of a different format, just a quick intro. But what I'm thinking I'm going to do is I'm going to do one episode of random stuff, science, technology, whatever it may be. And then I'm going to do another episode where I talk about sports because my schedule has freed up a little bit, got some extra time. And I think it's kind of better if I just separate the two into podcasts because sometimes on last week I stopped recording and then I came back to it later on in the day to record that. And I felt like it was a little bit rushed. So I'm now going to see how it works if I try and do multiple podcasts a week. And hopefully for those who kind of like when I talk about this stuff with the science and space and all that, hopefully you enjoy that. I certainly do. I think it's fun to kind of talk about this stuff and see exactly what's going on in our universe around us. And then in another podcast, I'd love to talk about the state of the sports world and kind of what we're seeing. Make my picks, do all that stuff. That'll be on Thursdays. I'm thinking right now, but that still might come out later. So I don't know. I gotta figure it out. But I'm recording this today on Wednesday. Hopefully, dropping this tomorrow on Thursday, and then recording on Thursday, and maybe that will come out on the weekend or something like that. But still trying to figure it out. But today's episode going to be pretty simple. Couple of things that have been in the news recently. The first one that I kind of wanted to touch on and talk on because it relates to something that we talked about in a previous week. And that is regarding our sun. So there are a multitude of different subjects and topics regarding our sun, but I feel like one of the most important ones is the sun's relation to us here on Earth. Because without the sun, we would not be here, right? We would not have come into the form that we are currently, thanks to the warmth and the light rays and all of the stuff that the sun provides us. However, not everything with the sun is perfect. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of control, if any control, over the sun. And so now, with that being said, when there's things such as this, it makes you a little bit worried, right? Gaping hole in the sun bigger than 60 Earths just blasted solar wind right at us. Hearing that right off the bat, not a title of an article where you're like, oh, that's an interesting topic. No, this makes you feel a little uneasy, makes you feel a little stressed as well. So we're gonna kind of talk about this news story, talk about these particular solar activities that have happened in recent days and kind of the reporting on it. And then we're also going to kind of break down. I'm going to do my best to explain exactly what they are talking about. So let's start off. Giant hole in the atmosphere of the sun, more than 5 times larger than the diameter of Jupiter, is unleashing a powerful solar wind that's blasting through the solar system. It's called a coronal hole and is currently rotating away from Earth. But a few days ago, from its position straddling the equator, it was pointing right at us, directing a stream of particles in Earth's direction. I mean, I didn't remember that. Good thing that wasn't 10 times worse because that would be not good. But let's continue on. The result was nothing to be alarmed about, a mild solar storm. But the hole does contribute to a wider pattern of rampant solar shenanigans as we enter solar maximum. The sun has been quite rowdy lately, which is sort of to be expected. So the sun goes through activity cycles in which it gets more active with sunspots, solar flares, coronal mass ejection, and coronal holes. You can see in this video right here, for those that are watching, this is that coronal hole right there that is massive. I mean, you look at the size of the overall sun and you see this taking up, I'd say, almost about half of this particular side of the sun. And now imagining how large that is, this is a massive, it's not even exactly a hole in the sun. It's not like there's not anything there, but we'll continue on and kind of explain this a little bit more. But that's kind of what it looks like. This isn't visible light either. This is a different, doesn't say, but that's definitely not visible light how we would see it. But continuing on, this cycle appears to be driven or coincide with the sun's magnetic cycles, during which the solar magnetic field reverses polarity and its north and south poles switch places. This is talking about the solar maximum and solar minimum, which is the basically the activity and the mostly just the activity of the sun that kind of goes through different phases, and it can take different time frames. So it's not like a moon cycle where every 28 days it's flipping. No, sometimes it can change in a day, a month, a week, a year, whatever. You probably know about sunspots, solar flares, and coronal mass ejection, something I talked about last week on the podcast. Sunspot is a temporary spot on the sun where magnetic fields get quite a bit stronger. This results in a cooler, darker freckle on the sun's surface. Solar flares and coronal mass ejections are eruptions, often associated with sunspots that are caused by a giant release of energy that occurs due to magnetic field lines snapping and reconnecting. A coronal hole, by contrast, which is what was in that video that I showed you, can't be seen in optical light like sunspots, but when we look in ultraviolet wavelengths, we see huge dark patches that are dimmer than their surroundings because they are cooler. So that's our answer. That was ultraviolet. All right, continuing on. Because the magnetic field is open, the wind that constantly blows from the sun can escape more readily. The result is a more powerful gusting of solar particles and plasma out into the solar system, flowing around any planets that may be in their path. The current hole, which at time of writing has almost rotated away to the far side of the sun, is as big as a big, I don't know why it's writing like that, but that's definitely a typo. It measures around 800,000 kilometers or 500,000 miles along its longest axis. Jupiter's diameter is around 140,000 kilometers, so less than 25%. 800,000 compared to 140,000. And Earth, 12,742. So, I mean, that's what? That's like 1,000 times bigger almost. So, pretty massive. The hole was facing Earth around December 2nd, and the solar wind smacked into us over the course of December 4th and 5th. Luckily, we are still here. This is recorded on December 6th. So we're still alive, thankfully. The result, as per the NOAA, was at most a G1 to G2 level solar storm. So we'll talk about that classification later, which is the mildest of the solar storms that can hit us, and not much would have been noticeable to most of us. All right. You can see sunspots visible on the sun December 6th. The more powerful solar storms are generated by coronal mass ejections and flares. A coronal hole is relatively passive. The solar wind is more powerful, but it's not being actively flung outwards with an additional push. A violent coronal mass ejection or flare, by contrast, actively ejects material outwards. Those are the ones that we have to be careful of. And like I said last week, with that new probe sent out by the Indian government, hopefully it'll be able to help us detect these and get a better view of our sun so we can understand these more and be able to predict them in the future. The current solar cycle has already proven to be much stronger than initially suspected and is going to continue in this vein for a little while longer. So go back right here. This little hole. Once again, this is not visible light. This is ultraviolet light. So this is an absence of ultraviolet radiation in that particular spot. That is what caused some concern. And you can see coronal hole in the sun prompts aurora alert for southern states. This is Earth.com. A high-speed stream from a coronal hole is expected to lead to G2 moderate geomagnetic storming on December 4th and G1 minor storming on December 5th. Yeah, once again here, coronal holes are striking features of the sun, often appearing as dark regions in the solar corona when observed in extreme ultraviolet and soft X-ray solar images. These areas are notable for being cooler and less dense compared to their surrounding plasma. The darkness of coronal holes is attributed to their nature as regions of open unipolar magnetic fields. A couple here, kind of saying the same thing right here. Coronal holes are most prevalent and stable at the solar north and south poles. These polar holes can grow and expand to lower solar latitudes. Additionally, coronal holes can develop in isolation from polar holes, or an extension of a polar hole can split off to become an isolated structure. Persistent coronal holes serve as long-lasting sources for high-speed solar wind streams. As the high-speed stream interacts with the slower ambient solar wind, a compression region forms known as a co-rotating interaction region. Big words. From the perspective of a fixed observer in interplanetary space, the CIR, or co-rotating interaction region, will lead the coronal high-speed stream. Kind of go back here. Another thing, forecasters closely analyze coronal holes for their potential to cause escalated geomagnetic activity and possible storming. They're noted on the daily synoptic drawing. The Space Weather Prediction Center forecasters consider the effects of those two things, the CIR and CHSS, which we talked about earlier, when forecasting the anticipated levels of overall planetary geomagnetic response for each 3-hour synoptic period over the next 3 days. So they're tracking this stuff with the best of their abilities. And this is the website that it was referring to. This is a government website, the Space Weather Prediction Center, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. You can see the current solar wind speed, 565 kilometers a second. That is very fast. But you can see right here, a coronal high-speed stream is likely to cause G2 geomagnetic storming. Right here, this is from them talking about it right here. They didn't seem too worried about it, but yeah, so 24-hour observed maximums, they just had an R1, so nothing too crazy right here. Now I won't go further down X-ray flux, proton flux, because simply I have no idea what the hell that is. But two things that I wanted to look at were these two little gifts that they had right here. I thought these were really cool. So this first one is a coronal mass ejections, basically data, but you can see from, and it shows the date 2023, December 5th. And then the time is starting at 15:18. That's military time. So that's 3:18. So let's play this and watch and see what happens. You see all of that plasma just getting shot out from the sun. You can see a big plume right there. Boom. And then it goes until 3:10. today. So this is forecasting a little bit into the future, these coronal mass ejections. But you can see at 1:30, there was a major explosion right here. This is today on the 6th, and then that kind of shoots out, which is cool. All right, so that's our first video, kind of showing what it looks like, these coronal mass ejections. Obviously, these ones are luckily not pointed towards us, so it's a little easier to see. Now we'll go to this other one, kind of just shows the sun and extreme ultraviolet radiation. So just kind of just chilling, and you can see the timeline very slowly rotating, but this is today forecast. So very, very cool stuff right there. But once again, I kind of want to talk a little bit more about this geomagnetic storms, to kind of, because I think it's important to understand this stuff, because a lot of times what'll happen is, and this has happened in movies and video games as well, where they talk about a massive coronal ejection from the sun will take out all of the satellites, will take out all of the electricity on Earth, which is true. That could happen, and that's a thing of major concern. However, one, it's not likely, and two, there's not really too much that we could really do about it. If the sun explodes or the sun has a massive ejection, we can't stop it. So, but it's important for us to know when these are coming. So if there's one that's kind of moderate, that's not going to wipe out life on this earth, we can go through some precautions and some steps to reduce the chance that it has a devastating effect on the population. Now, that Indian spacecraft, the Aditya 1, that'll help us, right? Other spacecraft and other Earth-based telescopes and instruments can help us kind of figure out when or what is going to happen in terms of the sun. And hopefully that can give us a little bit more of an insight as we progress as a society. But kind of want to talk about, and I've talked about many times before, that the northern lights are caused by basically plasma or particles, charged particles, getting shot out by the sun, hitting our magnetic field, and then crashing into the poles and creating those northern lights, those colors in the sky that so many people love and enjoy. That's caused by the sun. And I don't have to go too much into that, because I've talked about it way too many times in the past. But going back here, what is a magnetic field? And why is this important, particularly for not only our planet and life, but for other planets such as Mars? Because there is a theory about Mars, which I may have talked about on the podcast before, but I'll talk about again. But first, what is a magnetic field? Many planets have an energy shield protecting them from cosmic radiation, which is dangerous for all living things. Why is there radiation in space? Thermonuclear reactions are constantly occurring on the surface of the sun, creating this radiation. Let's go back to the shield. It's called the magnetic field. The Earth has one too. Let's say we're not destroyed because Earth's magnetic field saves us from space radiation. Like I said, with the northern lights, that is a result of the sun shooting out these very harmful, basically radiation. Now, if we didn't have that, that would just go right through our atmosphere and hit the inhabitants of the planet. And it's not like the sun just started shooting out radiation now. It's been doing it for a long, long time. So going back to the very first stages of life on this planet, millions, if not billions of years ago, that would have been completely wiped out by this harmful radiation from the sun. So the fact that we do have a magnetic field around our planet is so important for ultimately life on our planet, among other factors, but it's one of the factors as to why life has kind of come from this planet. And is it something that is only happening on Earth, or are there other planets that have magnetic fields as well? Because, um, I mean, if you don't have a magnetic field and you're orbiting around a star in the habitable zone, it doesn't really matter how, if you have liquid water on the surface or anything like that, if you have oxygen in the atmosphere. To our knowledge, there is no life that can really sustain radiation from a star like we have for long enough to evolve and get into the current state that we are right now. So there's many different factors that have led to life on this Earth. Now, shifting into when I mentioned other planets that have potentially either have or had magnetic fields in the past, Mars. Many people believe that what happened to Mars is they did have liquid water on the surface and potentially life on the planet. But what happened was the magnetic field of that planet was eventually stripped away from the own sun. And over time, the magnetic field got weaker and weaker on the planet, which allowed more and more radiation to hit the surface, which then most likely killed any chance of life on that planet. But moving on to, where does a magnetic field come from? So obviously it's something that is very important, and we know what magnets are, right? But how does the Earth get a magnetic field? Does it have something in it? Like, are there giant magnets on the inside of the Earth? Like, how is the Earth getting this field? Well, an object with electric current running inside has its field. Phone chargers, TVs, this very laptop, this very camera that I'm speaking into, this microphone, everything. The stronger the current, the larger the field. In general, the source of a magnetic field is a moving charged particle, and as a result, electric current. All objects consist of atoms, and an atom is a positively charged core and electrons moving around it. So anybody has fields inside? No, because they are divergent and compensate each other so that there's no field. But in some bodies, fields, but in some bodies, fields overlapped. Then there is a field. In Earth's iron core, there's current too. That's why the planet has a magnetic field too. It looks like this. And you can see solar wind hitting the Earth, and then this Earth's magnetic field right here. So what will happen is the particles, the solar wind, and the particles ejected from the sun will hit this magnetic field, kind of go up and around, and then hit into the poles and cause the aurora borealis, or the northern lights. And that is what is protecting us from this. All right. All right. So why do I need to know this? Because one of the major concerns, obviously, I talked about is loss of life on our planet. This stuff is very, very dangerous, but how so? Solar storms pose the biggest threat to spacecraft, satellites, and space stations such as the International Space Station, but can also affect ground infrastructure. To kind of harbor on that first point, there is no atmosphere out in space. The people on the ISS, if there is a solar flash or a solar flare or solar wind and particles are sent out such that they would affect people negatively on the surface, and those people are under hundreds of thousands of feet of atmosphere, well, the people up in space do not have any of that protection. And so they are at the first and foremost risk, as well as spacecraft or anything else that is out in space will be subject to this harmful radiation. But There are free electrons in metals. Make them move in a certain direction and you have electric current. One of the factors causing it, a changing magnetic field. That's why electric current can occur in metals if Earth's magnetic field changes. If the object is long enough, a bridge, a pipeline, a transmission line, then the currents can be quite strong. It's dangerous to touch such objects. Yes, do not touch telephone lines or power lines, or not a good idea. As far as the influence on human health is concerned, unfortunately, there has not been enough research to make certain conclusions. Why are scientists not interested? The connection between geomagnetic storms and human health hasn't been proved yet. Negative results, when no connection between different phenomena is found, are reluctantly published by scientific magazines. It's more useful to stop the research and focus on a more fruitful project. So they haven't been doing a lot of research on this topic for reasons such as it's not very profitable. It's very hard to kind of gauge the actual effects on humans for things that we can't predict. We can't predict that in November, December, January that we're going to see a coronal mass ejection of this power. Like we could, something that I talked about last week, like we could predict something such as an asteroid hitting our planet that we could kind of gear up for and see if we can potentially shoot it out of the sky or potentially set up some kind of defense to block it from hitting the surface of the Earth. With the sun, you can't really do that because you're not able to, one, really stop the charged particles from hitting the surface of the Earth. I mean, you're going to have something that covers the entire surface of the Earth. If, say, it gets through our magnetic field, if it's strong enough to do so. But also, you have to be very, very careful when it comes to this stuff, and we'll continue on. During an extreme solar event, this is once again National Weather Service, Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. There's the Aurora Borealis from space. It's got to be pretty cool to see, I bet. Since space weather has limited direct physical impacts on Earth, most of the actions taken during a solar storm are to mitigate the secondary impacts of an event, such as power outages, loss of water, etc. The actual storm can last anywhere from minutes to hours, but the resulting impacts can last for hours to weeks or longer. Conservation during and after a storm is key in the rare case of an extreme storm. So, what do you do when shit hits the fan? When the sun just sends out a massive pulse of energy through the cosmos and it hits us? What do you do? Well, follow energy conservation measures to minimize use of electricity, which can help power companies avoid imposing rolling blackouts during periods when the power grid is compromised. Follow the emergency alert system instructions carefully. Restrict phone usage to emergency situations only to keep lines open for emergency personnel and improve their response time. Misspelled again. This is a government website. Why? This happened with another article. I don't know. They gotta get spell checked. This is the U.S. government right here. Very, very disappointing. Anywho, avoid using elevators as well. Probably a very smart idea. Get a little extra cardio and run up and down the stairs. Review evacuation plan supply lists such as medications and family contact lists. The Aurora Borealis or northern lights, and the Aurora Australis or southern lights occur during geomagnetic storms when charged particles impact the Earth's upper atmosphere. During an extreme space weather event, the aurora will become very intense and will be visible in places that usually never see these elusive night lights. During the extreme events that occurred around Halloween of 2003, the Aurora Borealis was visible as far south as Texas. In the largest geomagnetic storm ever recorded in 1859, the aurora was visible in El Salvador. Wow. So luckily, it hasn't really gotten to a point where it's been super, super concerning to citizens. So thankfully, on the time scale of the sun, we're not going to be seeing um, too many blips in the radar. And if so, the sun is so massive in space, the time scales are so drawn out. I mean, a million years in the grand scheme of things is absolutely nothing. Yeah, many times you'll see on Instagram or on any social media really, they'll say if the entirety of the Earth's history or humans' history compared to the entire universe or even the creation of Earth, we'll just do the creation of Earth. If you're looking at a 12-hour clock, you have all 12 hours. Or if you wanted to do 24 hours as well, the amount of times that humans have been on the planet, if we're using this example in regards to the clock, would be about 1 minute. And now the other remainder of the time, the thousands of minutes, if we'll continue using that conversion, is all the other stuff that happened. The creation of mountains and oceans and lakes and the moon and all of these different events that have happened in the past millions and billions of years on this planet. So we haven't been around here for a very long time. Now, during those stages, we're talking on the scale of billions of years. How many events was there when the sun had a massive coronal ejection? Probably happened hundreds, thousands, maybe a million times where it had an explosion or a series of events on it where it sent out massive particles. And if there was life on Earth, it would be completely wiped out. Now, on the scale of, say, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years, even 10,000 years, is a blip in the radar on the sun, and it's pretty evident that during that time that there has not been a massive event where the sun wiped out a large group of people because it had a coronal mass ejection. So something to kind of think of, kind of ties into what we had talked about last week with the Indian space probe to kind of look at what is this stuff, right? What's going on with the sun? And I saw this as a as a news story, and it said to be aware of some solar activity. And I said, huh? And then I started reading an article, and I was like, wait. There's a real possibility that this is going to be potentially something bad. And then again, I heard it on Joe Rogan. I forget who the guests were, but they were talking about a massive solar event that could potentially wipe out life on this planet. Now, luckily, as we just saw, it wasn't super extreme or anything, and we don't expect anything super extreme in the near future. It is something to kind of, I think people should know about, should kind of understand a little bit about what exactly when we talk about coronal mass ejections, and also kind of understand that we are so lucky that the sun doesn't just go through a 10-year period where it's just shooting insane levels of radiation that are so high that all life on the planet is going to cease to exist. Like that could happen, and there would be nothing you could do about it. That is scary to think about, but I say be grateful that you're here and treat people nicely and try and help people out, because you never know when the sun's going to explode. Well, we kind of understand that. Let me rephrase. You never really understand when the sun is going to explode in cosmic terms. terms of a geomagnetic storm with this coronal hole in the surface of the sun. I don't know. Keep your eyeballs open, though. Keep your eyeballs open. Moving on to our next story. Is there life on Mercury? I don't know. Possibly in the planet's craters, a study reveals. So Mercury, first planet from the sun, gets pretty hot up in there. Many people would believe that there is no possible way that life could exist on that planet. No way that that life could then evolve into anything more special. That basically you're just kind of just waiting, waiting to see if there's signs of life in further places on the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, or even on Mars. But not many times do we talk about Mercury as a source of life, because there are many factors that would point to it not happening. Scientists at the Planetary Institute have uncovered compelling evidence suggesting the potential for life on Mercury, particularly at its North Pole. Using images from NASA's Messenger probe, the researchers discovered features that appear to be salt glaciers within Mercury's Radicelati and Emanescu craters. Unlike ice formations on Earth, these glaciers would consist of salt compounds that trapped volatiles such as water, nitrogen, and carbon dioxide. Three things that make up, well, it's particularly nitrogen, things that make up most of our atmosphere. And most of the environment around us, especially with water, the majority of our planet is just water and a lot of carbon dioxide, C2O, or CO2, sorry. So within these glaciers, there are some of the building blocks of life. And I've talked about before the K2-18b planet, where we found particularly not only just water molecules in the atmosphere, but we also found other organic molecules that can only be created by life. I want to say it was, I don't remember. I'd have to look that up again. But so we're able to see on different planets these things inside of the atmosphere. However, we didn't really expect, or didn't have concrete knowledge of, I think is a better way to phrase it, of something similar happening to a planet such as Mercury, which is so much closer to the sun than we are. So let's talk about the origin of these glaciers made of salt compounds on the surface of this planet. Formation of the glaciers is attributed to the impact of space rocks on Mercury's surface. The impacts penetrated the basaltic outer layer, releasing the volatile, rich compounds from beneath the surface. Mercury's extreme temperatures, reaching up to 806 degrees Fahrenheit or 430 degrees Celsius during the day, have since caused the evaporation of these compounds. It gets hot and heavy up there. However, the remnants of the glaciers are identifiable through Earth-like geological features. Now, let's talk about habitable conditions. We'll continue on with the article. Quote, these Mercurian glaciers, distinct from Earth's, originate from deeply buried volatile rich layers, or VRLs, exposed by asteroid impacts. Our models strongly affirm that salt flow likely produced these glaciers, and that after their emplacement, they retain volatiles for over 1 billion years. Said study co-author Brian Travis. This comparison sparks the theory that subsurface areas on Mercury, shielded from the sun's intense heat, might harbor conditions conducive to extreme forms of life. So there are certain molecules and certain things that can survive in very precarious situations, many types of bacteria or viruses and that kind of stuff that we're more so familiar with. But let's continue on. So, specific salt compounds on Earth create habitable niches even in some of the harshest environments where they occur, such as the arid Atacama Desert in Chile, said study lead author Alexis Rodriguez. This line of thinking leads us to ponder the possibility of subsurface areas on Mercury that might be more habitable than its harsh surface. So beneath the surface, it might be a little bit better for life. These areas could potentially act as depth-dependent Goldilocks zones, analogous to the region around a star where the existence of liquid water on a planet might enable life as we know it, but in this case, the focus is on the right depth below the planet's surface rather than the right distance from a star. Because if it's on the surface, it's immediately going to get burnt up. And to our knowledge, we do not know very many forms of life that could survive in that environment. But first, before we go on, I want to talk a little bit about the Atacama Desert, because this thing is basically what they would call hell on earth. You can kind of see it. The Atacama Desert is a desert plateau located on the Pacific coast of South America in the north of Chile, stretching over a 1.6 thousand kilometer or 990-mile strip of the land west of the Andes Mountains. It covers an area of about 105,000 square kilometers or 41,000 square miles, which increases to 128,000 square kilometers or 49,000 square miles if the barren lower slopes of the Andes are included. The Atacama Desert is the driest non-polar desert in the world and the second driest overall, behind some specific spots within the Mercado dry valleys. It is the only hot, true desert to receive less precipitation than polar deserts and the largest fog desert in the world. And a fog desert is a type of desert where fog drip supplies the majority of moisture needed by animals and plant life. The area has been used as an experimentation site for Mars expedition simulations due to its similarities to the Martian environment. Yeah, so this thing is pretty rough. I mean, you can just see right here. I mean, it's beautiful. See these places, all of these different things right here. They got a couple observatories there. They got some animals there. That's on the coast. Yeah, so this place is pretty extreme, but they do have some observatories here, which kind of look cool in that barren wasteland. Back to the article. The research challenges the notion of Mercury as a planet devoid of volatiles. It suggests that volatile rich layers, or VRLs, are potentially hidden beneath the planet's surface. Quote, a central mystery concerning Mercury revolves around the genesis of its glaciers and chaotic terrains. What mechanism was responsible for the formation of VRLs? In our research, we introduce a model that integrates recent observational data to address this question, said Rodriguez. Notably, quote, we examined the Borealis chaos located in Mercury's north polar region. This area is characterized by intricate patterns of disintegration, significantly enough to have obliterated entire populations of craters, some dating back approximately 4 billion years. Beneath this collapsed layer lies an even more ancient cratered paleosurface, previously identified through gravity studies. The juxtaposition of the fragmented upper crust, now forming chaotic terrain, over this gravity-revealed ancient surface suggests that the VRLs were in place atop an already solidified landscape. Challenging long-held theories. Continuing on. Rodriguez said that these findings challenge prevailing theories of VRL formation that traditionally centered on mantle differentiation processes, where minerals separate into different layers within the planet's interior. Instead, the evidence suggests a grand-scale structure, possibly stemming from the collapse of a fleeting, hot, primordial atmosphere early in Mercury's history. This atmospheric collapse might have occurred mostly during the extended nighttime period when the planet's surface was not exposed to the sun's intense heat. Very interesting. Continue on, our last little thing. These insights were made possible through the use of sophisticated models and detailed analysis of observational data. All right. So here is the study right here. I'll post this down in the comments, but if you do have time, read it out because they kind of go through it right here where all of this stuff actually is and kind of what they believe is making it up. Now we have little Miss Carmela joining the show. Up and walking around. She's been sleeping for a little while, but now she's up. Yeah, right? Good girl, lay down. All right, now she's getting in her bed. Good girl. You're a good girl, Carmela. Lay down. I'm just recording a podcast. Good girl. You're doing good. There she goes. Nice. I don't know why sometimes she doesn't want to sleep in her bed. I mean, it's got a blanket in it. It's got the cushion in. Like right now, she has her head and arm on the outside of it. It can't be comfortable. Earlier, she was sleeping on the floor, which not comfortable at all. But we'll continue on. So in this study, kind of talk about the basically what that article was talking about, but this goes way more into depth. Right here. Boom. November 17th. Boo, 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 boo. Very, very, very cool. So the possibility of life on Mercury, I'm going to say right now, not very likely. I would say the chances are pretty low because it is a very, very tough environment, obviously because of the temperature. Um, Also because you have a constraint where you have to be underneath the surface of the the surface, right? Underneath the surface of the planet. So you have to be underground in these salty glaciers. And that's potentially where life would be. So it's not like there's underground water per se, like we would describe it. It's more glacier, so it's more frozen in a sense. But because of the vast temperature differences on the planet, there could indeed become a different uh, existence of life that could survive that, such as tardigrades, which can survive in the vacuum of space. I think they brought them to the International Space Station as well. But they're a very small life form that can survive out in space. High temps, low temps. They're very sturdy, I'll say. But we'll keep an eye on this story. Maybe we'll come back to it, but I'm not thinking that we're gonna find life on Mercury anytime soon. I could be wrong. I may be wrong. I don't think I'm wrong, but I could be, right? You would think. Let's continue on. Uploading your mind to a computer will require three crucial things. This is sciencealert.com. Imagine brain scanning technology improves greatly in the coming decades to the point where we can observe how each individual neuron talks to other neurons. And then imagine we can record all this information to create a simulation of someone's brain on a computer. This is the concept behind mind uploading, the idea that we may one day be able to transition a person from their biological body to a synthetic hardware. The idea originated in an intellectual movement called transhumanism and has several key advocates, including computer scientist Ray Kurzweil, philosopher Nick Bostrom, and neuroscientist Randall Cohen. I don't know, Cohn. The transhumanist central hope is to ascend the human condition through scientific and technological progress. They believe mind uploading may allow us to live as long as we want. Interesting. So, uploading your consciousness, basically uploading who you are as a person onto a laptop, a computer, or something like that, but have yourself, your essence, your soul basically on a hard drive in your phone, something that you could download, something that you could potentially send in an email. Is that what this is talking about? I'm not sure. Let's continue reading. The feasibility of mind uploading rests on three core assumptions. First is the technology assumption, the idea that we will be able to develop mind uploading technology within the coming decades. Second is the artificial mind assumption, the idea that a simulated brain would give rise to a real mind. And third is the survival assumption, the idea that the person created in the process is really you. Only then does mind uploading become a way for you to live on. How plausible is each of these? Each of these on their own are very important and very integral. Some I can see as more of a issue than others, but let's continue reading. First off, the technology assumption. Very hard to simulate a human brain. We are not even close in terms of a technological way to do this. Very, very hard to do so, and we are just scratching the surface right now in 2023. Trying to simulate the human brain would be a monumental challenge. Our brains are the most complex structures in the known universe. They house 86 billion neurons and 85 billion non-neural cells with an estimated 1 billion. Oh, hold up. Wait a minute. With an estimated 1 million billion neural connections. A lot of connections. For comparison, the Milky Way galaxy is home to about 200 billion stars. A lot of stuff in there. Now, what they're trying to do is they're trying to map out all of these neuron connections and see how they interact with each other and what each individual connection is, to see how we can basically, what they will call here, mapping it out. So creating a map for the brain and for the mind. Let's continue on. Where are we on the path to creating brain simulations? Right now, neuroscientists are drawing up 3D wiring programs of the brains of simple organisms. The most complex, comprehensive connectome we have to date is of a fruit fly larva, which has about 3,000 neurons and 500,000 neural connections. We might expect to map a mouse's brain within the next 10 years. So 3,000 neurons compared to 86 billion neurons. Quite a discrepancy. The human brain, however, is 1,000 times more complex than a mouse brain. Would it take us 10,000 years to map a human brain? Probably not. We have seen astonishing gains in efficiency in similar projects such as the Human Genome Project, which you should check out. It took years and hundreds of millions of dollars to mass the first human genome about 20 years ago. Today, the fastest labs can do it within hours for about $100. With similar gains in efficiency, we might see mind uploading technology within the lifetime of our children or grandchildren. I would say probably grandchildren. That said, there are other obstacles. Creating a static brain map is only one part of the job. To simulate a functioning brain, we would need to observe single neurons in action. It's not obvious whether we would achieve this in the near future. Many different factors can go into this. One, I think, is just money. Are you going to have the money to invest and research this topic? Because it's going to take a lot of resources and a lot of time to be able to map a human brain, much less to try and see what the connections themselves, the individual connections are doing to the brain? What makes you sad? What makes you happy? Is it these particular neurons that are firing together that make you happy, or is it this configuration? Up next, the artificial mind assumption. Would a simulation of your brain give rise to a conscious mind like yours? This is one of the biggest questions possible. The answer depends on the connection between our minds and our bodies. Unlike the 17th century philosopher Rene Descartes, who thought mind and body are radically different, most academic philosophers today think that the mind is ultimately something physical itself. Put simply, your mind is your brain. Still, how could a simulated brain give rise to a real mind if it's only a simulation? If we're in a computer, if we're in a digital landscape, if we're simulating this experience that we're having right now, whether you're listening or watching to the video, trying to simulate this experience is a little difficult. Well, many cognitive scientists believe it's your brain's complex neural structure that is responsible for creating your conscious mind, rather than the nature of its biological matter. So basically, it's not that the fact that your brain is made up of different molecules, it's the fact that you have certain neural structure. So your neurons in your brain are set up in a certain way. One is a little bit higher, one's a little bit lower, one's connecting to this one, whereas in somebody else, it's connecting to that one. The idea is that more so than, well, this brain has this much fat. It's 95% fat and 3% muscle in this, and this one's 94%. It's not like that. It's the actual neuron connections in the brain, of which there are billions upon billions and trillions upon trillions, that actually make us who we are. And now, one of the interesting things is that over time, as we're kids, new connections will get made. You learn something new, you learn a new language. That's something that gets added to your brain. You get new neural connections that somebody who grows up in, let's say, China and never hears the English language will simply not be able to have a conversation, because in their brain, they physically do not have a neural connection between speaking English, certain words that I'm saying, and connecting it to their ears, to their mouth, to their tongue, the muscles in their face so that they can speak it, the muscles in their ears and the sensory organs in their ears so that they can hear it and understand it. They don't have that connection. I don't have that connection with speaking. I pick a language, German, Russian. I can't speak those languages because, one, I don't have any experience with those languages. And as a result, I don't have any connections in my brain to understand those. Let's continue on. When implemented on a computer, the simulated brain would replicate your brain structure. For every simulated neuron and neural connection, there will be a corresponding piece of computer hardware. The simulation will replicate your brain structure and thereby replicate your conscious mind. Today's AI systems provide useful, though inconclusive, evidence for the structural approach to the mind. These structures run on artificial neural networks, which copy some of the brain's structural principles. Are they able to perform many tasks that require, and they are able to perform many tasks that require a lot of cognitive work in us. Now, obviously, they haven't done testing of taking somebody's brain, putting it in somebody else, and then that person being able to somehow say that that person is now the same as the other person. Like, we really don't understand exactly what's going on, what our experience in this life is. And many people would go to religion to explain that. And yeah, that 100% makes sense, because there's an explanation right there, depending on what religion you are in terms of your faith of. However, if we were able to transfer your entire existence, your entire personality, all of your memories, all of your little quirks that you do, the things that make you tick, if you could implement that and transfer that over or copy that onto another being and upload it, would that be the same? If the neural structure in the brain is all the same, is that person then going to be the same as you? Is that person going to be a copy of you, brain wise? Or is there something of a higher level that we would call our soul that is something that we do not understand and we cannot replicate? And then that begs the question of, is there higher dimensional powers that can do so? I don't know. Maybe. Moving on. The survival assumption. Let's assume it is possible to simulate a human brain and that the simulation creates a conscious mind. Would the uploaded person really be you, or perhaps just a mental clone? This harks back to an old philosophical puzzle. What makes it the case that when you get out of bed in the morning, you're still the same person who went to bed the night before? Philosophers are divided broadly into two camps on this question. The biological camps believe morning you and evening you are the same person because they are the same biological organism, connected by one biological life process. The bigger mental camp think the fact that we have minds makes all the difference. Morning you and evening you are the same person because they share a mental life. Morning you remembers what evening you did. They have the same beliefs, hopes, character traits, and so on. So which camp is right? Here's a way to test your own intuition. Imagine your brain is transplanted into the empty skull of another person's body. Interesting. Is the resulting person who has your memories, preferences, and personality you, as the mental camp thinks, or are they the person who donated their body as the biological camp thinks? In other words, did you get a new body or did you get a new mind? A lot hangs on this question. How so? Well, if the biological camp is right, then mine uploading wouldn't work, assuming the whole point of uploading is to leave one's biology behind. If the mental camp is right, there is a chance for uploading, since the uploaded mind could be a genuine continuation of one's present mental life. So, is you as a person, your hopes, dreams, everything, your emotions, all of this stuff, character traits, everything, is that something that is physically specific to your physical brain? Or is that something that is in your mind, is of you of an essence, something that can be copied from your brain and implemented onto another person? I don't know. I don't know. I think it's interesting to think about though, because technology will at some point probably get to a point where we'll be able to map out the human brain and we'll be able to say we can make an 100% exact copy of your brain and of all your connections, of all your hopes, dreams, beliefs, how you react to this, how you react to that, and upload it to a server and put it into a newborn baby so that your life can continue. Now, say you're on your deathbed. They come to you, they say, listen, we're going to dig. All right, they're not Italian, but I'm trying to make it a little bit more ominous. They come in, they sit you down, they say, listen, we know you're kind of towards the end of your life. We know you don't have too much time waiting. On behalf of the United States government, we wanted to offer you an opportunity to see if you would like to upload your brain to this network. And you say, no, I think I'm good. And they say, well, wait, let us explain first. It is a new study, a new area where we're trying to understand what exactly the brain is, what exactly you are. And we think that you're a perfect candidate for this. You're at the end of your life. And if you put your brain into a newborn baby, And then we're able to test whether or not you wake up in that new body. And then you'll grow up, you'll become 10, you'll become 15, you'll become 20, you'll become 30, you'll become a full grown adult. And throughout that course of time, you'll be able to check in with us and we'll ask you, hey, are you still the same person or are you somebody else? Do you have any memories? Do you have any experiences that you can draw from in your past life when you were the original you? Or are you somebody who is different? Are you not able to access those memories? That would be something that would provide a lot of clarity on the situation. Moving on. Wait, there's a caveat. What happens when the original biological you also survives the uploading process? So you have your brain, you upload it to a thing, and then you transfer that brain basically map into another human. But you're still alive, you're not dead, and that person is still alive. They're not dead. What happens then? Would you, along with your consciousness, split into two people, resulting in two of you, one in a biological form B and one in an uploaded form C? So you're A. Oh, no, biological form B. And then the uploaded form is C. No, you, A, can't literally split into two separate people, B and C, and be identical with both at the same time. At most, only one of them can either be you. Either A is going to be that B person or A is going to be that C person. It seems most intuitive that after you split, your biological form would continue as the real you, A equals B, and then upload merely a mental copy, or that upload would merely be a mental copy. But that makes it doubtful that you could survive as the upload, even in the case where the biological you is destroyed. Why would destroying biological you magically elevate your mental clone to the status of the real you? It seems strange to think this would happen, although one view in philosophy does claim it could be true. Finally, worth the risk. Unfortunately, the artificial mind assumptions and the survival assumption can't be conclusively empirically tested. We would actually have to upload ourselves to find out. Good luck getting contestants for that one. Uploading will therefore always involve a huge leap of faith. Keyword faith. Personally, I would only take that leap if I knew for certain my biological hardware wasn't going to last much longer. The state of science and the state of what our society is currently capable of doing and the questions that we're asking. This is a question of morality. If you had the option of uploading yourself to, say, this cloud platform and then re-downloading it onto another person as you're towards the end of your life in an attempt to extend your life, would you do it? Let's say they've had 10 people who have done it and 5 out of the 10 have had positive experiences and they claim that they are indeed not even a copy, they are the same person continued into a new meat sack, a new body. But then what starts happening if it just doesn't work out? Would you do it? I don't think I would. I think one of the interesting things about topics such as this is that it seems so far off in the future. It seems like something that is completely and utterly science fiction. However, there are people out there who, because of their own particular beliefs, especially when it comes to something like this about, is the mind something just physical, just neurons in our head that are just firing, or is it something more? Are we a transcendent species where the mind is something in the fabric of space that creates us? Is it not just this not neuron fires, so this person says this one thing, or this person's neuron fires that way, so they think this specific thing. No, is it something that is ingrained into the fabric of the space time in which we live? Is it something that no matter what you do, this particular configuration of a brain exists in a person? These particular experiences exist in a person, whether it's any place or any time in the future. This particular configuration of neurons would make this particular person. I don't know. I don't know. It is a question that I think is one of those where it's almost impossible to answer because none of us really truly know. I guess the only people who would kind of know are the people who have died and gone to the afterlife. There's so many stories of near death experiences or people who have died. They go into a coma or their heart stops beating and then they're officially dead for a couple of minutes, but then they get brought back. So many of those stories of people having out of body experiences, watching themselves, and being able to point things out in the room, which they were unconscious, they were dead. They couldn't have known that. But because they have this out of body experience, they can relay this information back. What is that? I mean, what happens after we die is the ultimate question. It is the ultimate, what is this place? Many people talk about simulation theory. Is this actually a simulation? Are we in this giant computer simulation where we're just pawns almost? I don't know. I think it's important to ask these questions. I think it's important for us to get answers as well. And I think it's important that you, knowing this possibility, spend some time and think about it. Like, what is this? There's cars going outside. They're driving, and are these people that are on? We live right next to the highway. It's not very loud, thankfully. There's not a lot of accidents or people honking or beeping or anything, so it's very peaceful. But how many of the thousands of people just during the recording of this podcast who have driven back both ways pose the question to them? What do you think your mind is? What do you think this brain of ours is? Is it a simple just neurons in a particular configuration? Has these reactions that us as meat sacks or just corpses and bodies are just running through space? Or is there something deeper? Or is there this other realm where our mind exists and it's not something that's just physical? There is a almost spiritual aspect to it. There is almost this different dimension in which your mind can exist. I don't know. I don't know. I do know that spending some time in reflecting and thinking on that can help you treat other people with a little bit more understanding. And I'll say this like I say this all the time. Somebody cuts you off in traffic, somebody honks at you, somebody flips you off even. It's not the end of the day. And it's not something that you need to yell at somebody, get angry at, or fight over, because at the end of the day, we're just humans. We're just people on a planet, and we could get taken out with a solar flare. We could get a massive coronal mass ejection that hits our planet, and we're done. There is no way to stop that. There is no, well, the government's just going to implement a 2 week stay at home. No, nothing you could do. Nothing. That could happen right now. And then what would happen to us? You have to be appreciative of the time that you have on this planet. And while you have that time on this planet, I'm only 25. I'm only 25 years old. Most of this stuff, I think if you go 20 years in the future, I'll probably flip flop and disagree with every single thing that I'm saying right now because I'm not a very smart individual. I'm not somebody who is not even super original in my thoughts and stuff. And I do these podcasts because I find this stuff so interesting, but I have my own cons. And I wonder if something like this will be better understood by the time when I get older, because this is a question that I think almost everybody on earth wants to understand. For the people who are living lavish and the Elon Musks who are of the belief that we're living in a simulation, which is understandable for him. He is the richest man on the face of the earth publicly. Why wouldn't he believe it's a simulation? It's just a crazy set of circumstances and things that have fallen his way. Not that he's all due to luck, but he has gotten himself to a point where he's that guy. He's the one guy above the rest. And if you're in that position, I would probably believe it's a simulation. Like this whole thing is just crazy. But if you're somebody who, like myself, not making 500 grand a year, not making crazy amounts of money, not, I do all right. I'm able to pay my bills, but I think often about what is this experience that we have with each other? Why are we having so much disconnect in the world right now? Why do we have to do such terrible things? I mean, the wars going on currently right now and conflicts in America here. I don't know. If there is a possibility of us uploading our mind to a server at this stage of my life, I think I do it. I think I want to find it out. I want to find these answers. And I think you should too. I also think you should enjoy the rest of your day. This is the Zach Moore Podcast.